This is Counterpoint, and I'm your host, Tanya Granic Allen. Artificial intelligence may be the most transformative technology of our lifetime. It is already changing how we work, communicate, create, and process information. But it is also raising some of the biggest questions society has faced in generations. Will AI become one of humanity's most powerful tools, helping people solve problems and increase productivity? Or will it fundamentally reshape the economy and the way we live? Across the world, concerns are growing about the impact of AI on jobs, on privacy, on misinformation, and human creativity. Critics are warning that the power behind this technology could become concentrated in the hands of a small number of corporations and governments, giving them unprecedented influences over information, economic opportunity, and individual choices. Others argue that AI will create new opportunities and that societies must adapt rather than resist technological change. But beyond the technology itself lies a deeper question. As artificial intelligence becomes more capable, will it expand human freedom and opportunity or create a future where individuals become increasingly dependent on systems they cannot control? Well, today we'll explore the promises and risks of artificial intelligence, the economic disruption it may bring, and what this new era means for individual sovereignty and an increasingly automated world. And join me now is Mark Jeftovic, co-founder and CEO of Easydns Technologies, Inc. Mark, so great to have you on. AI is obviously dominating a lot of headlines these days. And actually, maybe I'll start with one thing. It's these data centers. We had a guest a few weeks ago say how much this investment in AI data centers will promote the economy, job creation, a lot of skilled trades. And Canada, because of our cooler climate, is like a natural ecosystem, I guess you could say, for data centers. But there have been so many protests, and every time I, look at different topics for shows, I keep thinking, oh, we should do one on these protests. Are people just overreacting, or do we have like a natural resources concern or a governance concern with AI centers?
Hi, Tanya. I think it's really a case of overreaction on the part of the public or the people who are opposed to this. And I think it could be a minority of the public, the vocal minority that you hear so much about. Uh, AI is definitely a transformative shift. It's AI that is driving the need for high performance computing. And to be a part of this big shift, big transformative evolution of the economy or the knowledge economy, I think Canada does want to take advantage of these natural edges that we have, like the climate, like we're an energy superpower, or at least we should be. We have plenty of energy to power these data centers. We have plenty of room to put them in. And we have a high tech economy that can make the greatest use of it. And what I found interesting, I find it very educational to go through newspaper clippings over the last 100 years, and you sort of see the same pattern for different technological shifts. Like in the early 1930s, there was a grassroots protest movement against gas stations. So I have these newspaper clippings from all these newspapers across Canada and the US about people protesting gas stations. In the late 30s, it was traffic lights. In the 1950s, there was a protest movement against television stations. And each time, this was put forward as a cataclysmic juggernaut that had to be stopped for the sake of society. And here we are all these years later, and these things have just become part of the fabric of our lives. And that's the same direction AI is going. That's the same direction high performance compute is going.
Well, that's because fear sells, right? It's an excellent. I come from political world, so I understand how to weaponize fear, if you will. But that being said, I mean, I think there is concern about the, um, in a positive way, of getting, yes, the gas out of the ground so that we can, cool these massive centers that tend to generate a lot of heat. But on the concern side is the resources, the water. Are we going to be contaminating, depleting, overusing our natural water, or do we just have such a dearth of it where we don't have to worry about it?
Yeah, that's one of the big misconceptions about data centers is that they just incessantly consume all this water. And I remember hearing the same thing about the oil sands in Alberta, that they were just going to use up all the water in the world. And I've come out of the Bitcoin space as well, and we've sort of heard all of these arguments before when it came to Bitcoin mining. Now the lens has widened to encapsulate all of this high performance computing. For one thing, most of these data centers, if not all of them, are closed loop systems. So you fill
Okay,
them
sorry, can I
once
just
with water.
I'm going to pause you here. We have to cut to commercial break, but we're going to talk about that and the closed loop systems in just a moment. We'll be right back. Welcome to Counterpoint. We're discussing AI technology and how it could help or maybe even hinder humanity. And we're also discussing data centers. There seems to be some uproar over the quantity, the location, why they're here at all. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. And joining me again is Mark Jeftovic, he's CEO of Easydns Technologies. Okay, Mark, we were discussing this misconception about how much water and resource utilization is involved in a data center. And you said something that it's a closed loop system. Can you expand on that, please?
So a data center doesn't just continuously consume water out of the water table or out of the available supply of water and then discard it, pollute it, contaminate it, and then brings in a whole bunch more water to do the same thing over and over again. You fill up a data center cooling system once with water, um, in the loosest sense, and then that water recirculates. It keeps recirculating through the data center to cool it. There will be some natural lossage and evaporation over time, so you do have to replenish it. But in the overall aggregate, data centers use a lot less water. I mean, orders of magnitude less than things like crop irrigation is the biggest one. Lawns and gardens, like lawn sprinklers, use up. I pulled some data before the thing. This is what, close to 3,000 billion gallons a year in lawns and gardens. I'm not sure which year this is from. Golf courses, a lot more than data centers. I mean, we have the numbers here. The data centers are increasing pretty
Right.
rapidly, but they're so far behind right now that if you really wanted to get upset about water usage, you could go to golf courses and lawn sprinklers and make a better case from an environmental standpoint.
Okay, well, that's why I love having you on because you bring us the facts. Okay, um, so that's good to know because I wanted to put that deal with that issue of the data centers, and I hope to do more digging into this even in the future because they're again maybe just a small cohort or a small group of noisy activists. I don't know, but I always love examining these things. One concern, and you probably share this as well, is AI displacing or replacing physical labor rather than, say, assisting human labor, which I see it more of as an assistance, not a displacement. But can you talk to us about how AI technology compares vis-a-vis, say, previous technological revolutions, evolutions, and human labor?
Right. So the conventional wisdom is that every technological revolution, despite fears that it's going to eliminate a lot of jobs, ends up creating far more jobs than it displaces. And now we're hearing a this time it's different argument that because AI is so fundamentally different, that there won't be that big replacement of new types of work and new types of jobs because AI is just going to be able to do it all. Um, we're starting to see some data come out. There's been some just in the last month or so coming out of some tech areas in the States that are saying that we're actually hiring a bit more than we were above trend line to sort of keep up with AI. Now they're hiring very specialized AI trained people to sort of manage the AIs. For physical labor, we haven't really seen it yet because we haven't had, what people are calling that chat GPT moment for robotics yet. Robots are still pretty novel. They're still somewhere between interesting and awkward. And so they haven't gotten to that point where, oh, wow, these things can do anything. But where we are seeing the initial indications or the early rounds of huge disruptions is in, white collar knowledge worker, middle management, all of these kinds of hierarchical management structures for gigantic organizations are being flattened in real time. And we are seeing job lossage there. We're seeing layoffs where companies are saying we're getting rid of 25% of the workforce or 50% of the workforce. Um, that has happened. in every technological revolution so far. Usually it happens physical first, knowledge second. This time it's happening the other way around. It's happening
Wow.
to knowledge workers first, middle management, the spreadsheet jockeys, because the robots aren't yet at the level where they can displace physical labor. That's coming. I have no idea on the timeline. It could be this year, it could be 5 years, but that will definitely be a thing.
Wow.
However, yeah,
Actually, I'm going to
but
pause
I
you there.
think,
We have to cut to commercial
sure.
break, but we're going to pick this up in just a moment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Counterpoint. I'm joined by Mark Jeftovic, co-founder and CEO of Easydns Technologies Inc., as we unpack some of new research and interesting ideas coming from the AI world, artificial intelligence. Mark, thanks again for joining me. In the last segment, you were mentioning that we've already seen AI displace some of the kind of white collar middle management type jobs. You said that something interesting that I hadn't thought of, or it hadn't occurred to me, that soon we will see kind of the blue collar jobs potentially being displaced, maybe in a year, 5 years, 10 years, we don't know. Like, are you talking about like skilled trades? Because I know right now there's a huge demand for skilled trades to help build the AI centers. Could they soon be displaced by the centers and the technology that they're building for?
That I haven't thought too much about it at that level, but probably they will be like disrupted last in line. So first, always unskilled trades. You're going to have robots doing car washes. You already do assembly lines. Wherever you have people doing rote, repetitive tasks, you can, when that robot moment hits, we'll get there. Then, what's going to make a robot as mind blowing as ChatGPT was when it first came out, or Claude Fable now? It'll be the ability to do skilled labor tasks, skilled
Mm.
physical tasks. So that will happen. However, I think what happens after that, the thing I notice, and I'm a tech CEO in that I didn't come up on the finance side, I came up on the coding side. I was like a programmer by trade and a sysadmin by trade. And I use AI a lot to do coding and vibe coding, they call it now. You have to have subject matter expertise to be really proficient at it. So, expert in a physical field or practice, like a plumber or a brain surgeon, like people who use their hands, but they have
Hmm.
to use their brains to use their hands, will be among the most sought after people to manage the AIs that are taking over those jobs because they have that subject matter expertise. I think what ends up happening, if anything goes extinct in this post AI, post robotic world, it could be the gigantic corporation, the big impersonal corporation, because you can flatten those down to, 500,000 people to 50 people to run the whole thing. But what happens to the other 450,000 people? I think what happens is you see this Cambrian explosion of one person corporations or two-person corporations, because everyone is going to have what I call these cognitive exoskeletons. You're going to be able to function at the level you're functioning now to the exponent 100. You're just going to be managing a bunch of AI agents, or you're going to be managing a bunch of robots, and whatever it is that you're good at doing,
Hmm.
anything from being a dentist to being a plumber or an HVAC consultant or a drone repair technician, you're going to be able to do that to the nth degree, leveraging these tools. And I think net, it's going to be a quite democratizing influence across most of society.
Well, it could be, but it really depends on, I guess, who controls that AI system, right? Because they don't they're not thinking. They're not thinking like
Mhm.
we think. They're not creative. They're using like a language, a code if that we give it, and a data set, if you will, and then piecing things together and spitting something out. So I guess it all comes down to who's in charge of that AI program or who programmed that AI module. Um, does this cause or pose a problem then for, you mentioned democratization, but for sovereignty then? Because are we just kind of having this locus of control in the hands of a few who have the ability to do this programming?
Yeah, that was the big fear. That's actually it's a non-issue now, although very few people know it, because you're looking at OpenAI and Anthropic as like practically a duopoly in the foundational AI space, and everybody has to pay OpenAI and Anthropic, and they're pretty well calling the shots. And you wake up every day, and one of those two companies has done something or introduced a product or service that's going to completely disrupt an entire industry, and people are thinking, we're going to be held hostage by these two companies. And then, Google is in there, and some of the other people are trying to get a foothold in there. But the big tension now, as always, I suppose, in the technology space is open source. And now we have these open source LLMs, ironically coming out of China, like Kimi
Really?
K3 and DeepSeek last year. Yeah. And there's a whole geopolitical game theory behind why China went that route. And it might even be outside of the scope, but the reality is these things are live now. They're out here now. And so they're not going to be the only ones. Like Meta, Facebook has released their LLMs as open source. And I think it's a coping strategy, whether it's geopolitically or, you know, Silicon Valley battle royale, where it's like, okay, one of the ways we can sort of carve out some space or get some breathing room is to open source our LLMs, our models.
Okay, I'm going to pause you
What
there. We've
that,
got to go to commercial, and you can tell me that in just a
yeah.
moment. Welcome back to Counterpoint. We're wrapping up our discussion on artificial intelligence, and joining me for that is Mark Jeftovic. Mark, in our last segment, we kind of delved into a little bit of the geopolitical environment around artificial intelligence. We know that the United States sort of dominates a lot, but in this field, but China has responded in a very open, democratic way. Shock, shock. Uh, what are some of the concerns of countries like China controlling some AI avenues versus America, where we would hope that democracy would be natural in its fiber?
Yeah, this is where things get interesting because this is such a transformative technological shift that we're in another arms race now, and it's an existential one that neither side can lose. So each one is trying to use their advantages as much as they can. And in the States, it's just that the United States is the innovation leader of the world. Silicon Valley is always out in front. They sort of set the pace, they dominate. They would like to keep it that way. China can't. They've also got some sanctions against them from the US administration that sort of makes it harder for them to buy compute, like some chips and that sort of thing. So they sort of reacted, the one of the ways that where they did have latitude to act, and that was to open source their models and to make their models much more efficient with less powerful chips. So now we have this interaction between open source and closed source. And I've heard some people say that the idea of running centralized LLM models is going to seem as quaint as going to, like, the record store and buying vinyl, or going to like Blockbuster to pick up VHSs off the shelf, because everything is going to become distributed. We live in a network shaped world. So people are going to be running open source LLMs locally, whether at home or at their office or at the business, to do, all of this compute. And I think we're going to get this hybrid of both, where you're going to be using these intelligent systems to switch between an open source model to handle a lot of your day-to-day compute. And then if you need really high-end stuff, you're going to swap in a foundational LLM to sort of do the really, atom cracking kind of thing.
So if we look ahead, say 10, 20 years, and we don't know at the pace in which AI will do its thing, but do you think ultimately it will then expand human freedom and opportunity, or do you feel we're leading to a place where individuals have less control over, maybe their work or their choices or information?
Well, I'm going to have a hard time answering this in the time we have left, so I'll try
We
and
have a
keep
minute
it
and a half,
simple.
a minute and a half.
Okay.
I gave you a lot of time.
Individuals, yeah, the individual is going to have the time of their life. You're going to have so much individual agency and ability and optionality, but you have to choose it on an individual level. I think what happens on a mass societal level is, I think there's a lot of popular mass movements that will sort of move more towards the government should do something about this. which will lead to this weird dichotomy where, in aggregate, people are slaves to the machine, like being ruled by algorithms, CBDCs, and things like that that we haven't even talked about. Whereas individuals can make the choice to say, I've got the sum total of all human knowledge available at zero marginal cost. And I've got ultra cheap, high performance compute to manipulate that and recombine it in novel ways that provide economic value. So the individual who's thinking this through has all these tools to work with for next to no cost. And if they make those decisions for themselves and start building, they'll be able to do it. But the same people who are out there protesting data centers are not going to be thinking in that way. And so there is going to be this widespread, almost technocratic overlay over this entire system, I
Wow.
think.
Well, it always comes back to the morality of the individual, right? And this is why we have to get back to reading the great books so we have a good moral underpinning and foundation. I'm going to end on that. I don't know why I went there, but I'm thinking of the Odyssey. I'm thinking of the Odyssey. Anyhow, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
That's all the time we have for today. See you next time.